Hello everybody, welcome back to another video with Lim Reviews. Now today I'm actually super excited to be sharing with you my personal review of the VIVO X80. I've been using this device for slightly more than a week now and I definitely have a lot of items to share with you. So today's video is going to be a little bit more longer than usual because I just want to get a bit more in-depth with the VIVO X80. So go grab yourself a cup of coffee, some water, and let's chill together and talk a little bit about the X80. Now in terms of pricing, the VIVO X80 here launched in Malaysia for RM3499, whereas the X80 Pro that I have here as well is launched at RM4999. So right off the bat, you know that there's a huge difference of 1,500 ringgit between both devices. So this video should really help you out in terms of finding out if the X80 should be your right choice to purchase if you are just considering either one of these devices. Now, moving on to my next point, I want to start off the video by talking about the main differences between the X80 Pro as well as the X80 because these are going to be the features that you will not be getting from the X80 Pro. So we're going to start off with that right off the bat. First things first, the X80 Pro here does come with a nicer display. We have a 2K resolution display on the X80 Pro compared to 1080p only on the X80. The next difference, the second difference here is in terms of the cameras. We do have 50 megapixel main sensors on both devices, but the 50 megapixel here is actually a larger sensor, so it's better in low light conditions as well as nicer bokeh backgrounds. Now, the third difference here is in terms of the ultra-wide sensor. The ultra-wide sensor on the X80 Pro again is 48 megapixels compared to 12 on the X80, so it's going to be taking more clearer, detailed pictures for your ultra-wide. If you take a lot of ultra-wides, that is also something that you might want to take note of. The fifth difference here is in terms of the telephoto lens at the back. Now, this is a 5x optical zoom telephoto lens, which is actually missing on the X80. Just take a look at the rear camera sensors. You do not have the additional square on the X80. Now, the next one is actually a very, very important one, and that is in terms of the stabilization. So the X80 Pro here gets the gimbal OIS, whereas on the X80, you only get the standard OIS. If you appreciate a more stable camera in terms of videography, then the X80 Pro here is the one to get because it's the only one that came with the gimbal sensor. Last but not least, the differences here is in terms of the processors. Now, the X80 Pro here comes with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, whereas the X80 here comes with a Dimensity 9000. Whether or not one is better than the other in terms of the processor, we'll talk more a bit about that later. So yep, those are the differences, the key differences that you need to take note of that is missing on the X80, and whether or not it is worth that additional 1,500 ringgit, you let me know. All right. So now that we've done talking about the differences, let's talk a bit about the X80. I want to start off talking about the X80 in terms of the cameras at the back. Now, we do have the triple camera setup that I just mentioned. The 50 megapixel sensor here is actually a Sony IMX866. Now, this is the successor to the 766 from last year, and of course, it is a bit better this time. Apart from that, you have that 12 megapixel ultra wide that I just mentioned, and you also have that 12 megapixel telephoto lens that does 2x optical zoom. Now, the whole story with the ZEISS branding on the back here is actually in terms of a couple of improvements. The first things first, you have that T-star logo at the back. That means that it is able to reduce the amount of glare from those lighting conditions when you're taking photos. Apart from that, the new ZEISS interface in the camera itself is also quite interesting here. Now, when you launch the camera right away, you will see that you have the ZEISS button sitting dead center at the top. Whenever you just tap that ZEISS button, it will go into a more natural color kind of approach. This actually reduces the saturation levels by -20. So if you just look at the interface very clearly here, very quickly here, you notice that on the top, we do have this toggle to actually adjust the amount of saturation levels as well as your exposure. Very, very convenient, but by just tapping the ZEISS button there, you will reduce the saturations by -20. Now, apart from that, ZEISS is also bringing back the same kind of bokeh filters that you can find on the X70. That means that, there's these 4 different kinds of filters. When you take portraits, you have those very nice, circular balls in the background. You might like it, but those are also brought back on the cameras here on the X80. Now, apart from that, there's also something quite new here which I actually enjoyed a little bit as well. Now, if you just go into video mode and you hit the stabilization, you will see that we have this horizontal line function. Now, what this does is that it locks the camera at this position right here. And even if you just shake the camera around, it will still maintain a very stable look from the cameras itself. So this is actually very similar to something that you might find on GoPro cameras, but it is actually brought onto the X80 devices, which I think is actually a very interesting factor. Now, let's take a look at the photos because we've talked all about the numbers, but let's look at the actual photos. Now, pictures taken during the day as you can see here, from most flagships these days, they perform very well. So similarly, with the new 50 megapixel sensor from Sony, we have very nice detailed kind of pictures. It's also showing a very high dynamic range here, which is very nice as well. Colors wise, I would say that it's really down to your personal preference at this point, because you can really just adjust that with just a tap of the ZEISS button. Either you want to choose a more natural approach, or you want something that pops a little bit more. Again, it's just one tap of a button to actually change that. I'm going to put a very quick side-by-side photo right now, so you can actually see the differences between the ZEISS and the non-ZEISS photos, so you can judge for yourself if you prefer the ones that are a bit more saturated, or you want the one that are a bit more true to life. Me personally, I think that the ZEISS button here is actually very helpful, because most of the time I ended up shooting with the ZEISS button turned on. Right, so that's just in terms of the daytime shots. In terms of the nighttime shots, we also have a lot of detail here, and this is actually being helped by the upgraded V1 Plus chip that is supporting the camera at the back. Now, what this V1 Plus chip does is it is again an improvement to the V1 chip that was on the X70 from last year, and this time the V1 Plus is able to perform even better low light photography. Again, let me show you a very quick test here. So I turned off the lights in this room, everything is totally pitch darkness, but I was still able to take a very clear and bright photo of my model car that is sitting on the shelf right there. So this is really proving how strong this low light photography is on the X80. Now again, I don't think this is going to be the use case of most people out there. I mean, who actually turns off the lights all the time and starts shooting at weird stuff around their house, right? So I also went to a park during the night, last night actually, and this is where I actually took a couple more of night photos. There was a lot of activities going on, so I thought this might be the perfect condition or situation where you might actually be in taking these kind of night photos. And you can see here, the photos actually turn out quite well. There's actually minimal noise during the night. The brightness levels is not exceedingly bright. Everything looks just nice, and it's again very similar to what you might actually see with your own eyes. So I love the night shots coming out from the VIVO X80. Everything looks pretty good here so far in terms of the night shots there. Alright, so now we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the videos coming out from the X80. Now, videos here looks, in terms of the stabilization, it is a little bit, it's not too stable to be honest, and that's because the OIS here, it works, but it is not as good as the one on the X80 Pro. I was really spoiled with the X80 Pro because it was super stable, but without the gimbal here on the X80, you will notice that you can still see my kind of footsteps as I walk throughout this park here. I wasn't walking super fast, I wasn't running or anything like that. I was just walking at somewhat normal speeds, and you can see that it is not as stable as you would want it to be. Apart from that, we do see that the colors here are a little bit more very saturated, and the ZEISS button does not actually work in your video mode, so you can't reduce the saturation levels in the video app here. But yeah, this is what you can expect in terms of the videography coming out from the VIVO X80. Overall, I'm still very happy with the performance of the cameras at the back. I think it is still a very solid snapper in terms of your pictures taken during the day and at the night. But if you want to go for the most stable kind of videos, this is where you have to look at the VIVO X80. Now, done with the cameras, let's talk about some other stuff on the VIVO X80. The next thing I want to talk about here actually is in terms of the performance, because I think the Dimensity 9000 chip is actually quite interesting as well. Now, the chip itself is actually one of the highest performance in terms of the Geekbench 5 scores that I've actually got on any devices to date. It scored the highest among all my other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 devices, which I'm going to show you right now. So actually quite surprised with the amount of benchmark scores that we can get here on the X80. In terms of the 3D Mark test that does this stress test, well, I did put it through the test, and of course, this is the results again that you can see here. At the end of the day, I just have to highlight that the Dimensity 9000 here takes a very different approach towards handling these really graphic intensive kind of situations. So anyway, those are just in terms of the benchmark scores. In terms of real world use, how does it actually feel like to use it? Honestly speaking, again, in my personal opinion, using it on the daily, launching your applications, everything is just blazing fast. It is almost exactly the same as the experience on a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 device. However, when it comes to gaming, this is where it is a sort of a mixed bag here. Now, what I mean by that is that games like Mobile Legends and PUBG, they run very smoothly, but it is not actually optimized yet to support the highest graphic levels or even a higher frame rate. So hopefully, in the future, Vivo will actually update this so that we can support higher graphic or faster frame rates, in terms of your gaming on the VIVO X80. We know that the potential is definitely there. It's just that when will Vivo actually give us the update to run these games at higher frame rates, higher graphics? That is still a question mark that we have to ask. Apart from that, that's just what I can mention in terms of the Dimensity 9000. In terms of your RAM and your storage, you get 12 gigs of RAM and you get that 256 GB of internal memory. Again, very sufficient here. No questions about that. And in terms of the battery, yeah, this is a very slim device here, but you do get a 4500 mAh battery, which actually lasted quite a long while. I think I was able to get a screen on time of like 6 to 7 hours. So battery is actually quite good on the VIVO X80. And of course, you have the 80-watt charger that came in the box. Now this actually charges from 0 to 50%, I think, in like 11 minutes or so. Anyway, it's quite a fast charging device here on the X80. Now, moving on to the front, we do have a fairly nice display here. This is actually a 6.78-inch, AMOLED display, 1080p, supports a 120Hz refresh rate. So everything looks fine here. The E5 display from Samsung is actually being used here, so you're going to be expecting a very color accurate kind of images on the VIVO X80, which again is great. But of course, if you want the best, the 2K display on the X80 Pro is actually still very much nicer, just in terms of image quality and all that. We do have this curved-sided display on the side, so sometimes when you are playing your games, you might accidentally hit something which you were not planning to hit. So yeah, I'm not really a huge fan of that curved sides on the display, but this is what we get. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say. Last but not least, I think we have to talk a bit about the design. Design-wise, I think it looks alright. It looks quite nice actually, in my personal opinion. Again, I like this color very much, and I think this is a color that you do not see very often as well. So feels very smooth to touch. You can't really see the texture at the back here. It's one of the nicest designs that I've actually seen. But again, design is quite subjective, so you tell me what you think about this device. It's a very slim and lightweight device actually, so quite nice about that there. Alright guys, so that is just it. My quick, or I shouldn't say quick, my very long review of the VIVO X80. Overall, at the end of the day, do I think 3,500 ringgit is reasonable for the VIVO X80? I still think it is quite solid, yes. You do get a very nice sensors at the back. The 50 megapixel is great. You also have the ZEISS features inside with that one tap for that camera function. Very good stuff there. Stabilization is not the best, but if you do not take a lot of videos, this should not matter too much to you. One more thing I do like is that the Dimensity 9000 is a very cool chip. It doesn't get hot at all, but on the flip side, it doesn't support very high graphics, so it shouldn't get hot as well, right? So, and yeah, I think if I have to save 1,500 ringgit, I might actually go with the VIVO X80. But if you want the full-fledged features, you can check out the X80 Pro, which I will cover in a separate video. Alright guys, thank you so much for staying till the end. If you are still here, thank you. I really appreciate all of you listening to me talk about this phone. But yeah, don't forget to drop a like, sub to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And I hope all of you guys are staying safe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!